I knew something was off when Darren showed up to the team review 15 minutes early, sipping from a company-branded mug like it was a damn Emmy Awards night. I'd barely unzipped my laptop before he fake chuckled and said, "No pressure, just impress us." I had impressed them, just not the way I wanted. My system wasn't flashy. No AI buzzwords. No blockchain fairy dust. Just clean, tested routing logic that shaved minutes off every delivery leg, auto-flagged dead zones, and could have saved the company 6 figures a quarter. But Darren stared at my slides like I was describing microwave repair. The guy once printed a Google Doc just to delete a sentence with a pen. "I see where you're going," he muttered, eyes darting toward his phone. "Let's, revisit next quarter." Fast forward 6 business days. HR called me into the small glass office that smelled like burnt coffee and lemon-scented despair. "Unfortunately, Karen," Linda began, blinking behind progressive lenses, "due to budget reevaluations and new automation protocols, we're sunsetting your role." Sunsetting. Like my job was a crusty old MySpace profile. I nodded slowly, because if I opened my mouth, I'd scream. They gave me a box, a $3,000 severance, and a thinly veiled compliment. "You are always so independent. You'll land somewhere great." Outside, I sat in my car, staring through the windshield like I was buffering. My hands hovered over the steering wheel, not gripping, just trembling. The prototype folder sat safe in my personal Git repo. The code, written at night on my laptop, using my own Amazon dev credits. Darren hadn't even understood my middleware diagram, called it web spaghetti. And yet I knew he was going to run with it. Back in my apartment that night, I cracked open a $4 bottle of red and pulled up the employment agreement. Scanned again. Nowhere did it claim ownership over side projects built off hours. I dug up emails, timestamps, proof the code existed long before I shared the deck. I even had a recorded Zoom session where Darren asked, "Wait, what's a webhook?" I stared at my monitor, heart thudding. They thought they'd fired a pawn, but pawns who know IP law? They flipped the board. The night before my final walkout, I slipped into the office like a ghost clocking in for a haunting. No one else was there, just the faint hum of the vending machine and the blinking light from the router, like a dying heartbeat. I plugged in my personal drive and started the slow, surgical extraction. Planning notes, devlogs, testing spreadsheets, diagrams I'd mocked up at 2 a.m. with a Red Bull in one hand and rejection simmering in my chest. Every file I touched felt like a fingerprint, not stolen, rescued. The system I built didn't just shave time. It learned. It evolved around traffic flow and delivery timing, adjusted routes based on weather delays, cross-referenced driver habits. I'd stayed up all weekend debugging an error Darren wouldn't have even known how to pronounce. And now I was supposed to just walk away? Fat chance. My laptop fan whirred softly as the last archive zipped, like it was cheering me on in solidarity. Next morning, the office was suspiciously chipper. Darren had organized a farewell coffee in the break room. I stepped in and was hit by the stink of burnt espresso and fake sympathy. Someone had brought donut holes. Darren stood near the Keurig like a mall Santa who couldn't wait to gaslight an elf. He clinked his mug against mine. "Just wanted to say, you've been a huge part of our ideation phase. Those early-stage thoughts of yours definitely sparked something." Something like projectile vomiting. I forced a tight smile and said nothing. Because if I opened my mouth, I'd start reading him his eulogy. He leaned in, whispering just loud enough for HR to pretend not to hear. "I'll make sure your notes don't go to waste." That's when I saw it. An open laptop behind him on the counter. A corporate Slack window glowed faintly. Darren's name bolded in blue beside a subject line he'd definitely meant to close. "New system proposal, lead, Darren W." My stomach went cold, like swallowing a live ice cube. The folder icon right below it said, Operations Streamlining version 2.1. I'd seen that exact naming convention before. It was mine. He'd cloned my work, changed the name, slapped his ego on the front page like it came pre-printed. I walked out of the break room without touching the donuts. By the time I hit the parking lot, numbness had calcified into something sharper. Resolve. I wasn't going to fight him for my job back. I wasn't going to beg. I don't do tantrums. I do blueprints and revenge. That night, I pulled open my personal notebook and scrawled 4 words at the top of a blank page. Phase 1. Obliterate Darren. I filed the LLC paperwork in my pajamas, eating dry cereal over my laptop, while Spotify blasted a playlist called Songs for Women Who Are About to Set Fire to the Tech Industry. Click. Submit on the name Generic Path Analytics because nothing screams, ignore me like a brand that sounds like it sells printer toner to accountants. No ego, no flash, just smoke and mirrors. The perfect cover. My apartment transformed into a war bunker overnight. HDMI cables draped over chairs like tripwires. Sticky notes nested across every surface. Routing logic flowcharts. Target customer personas. Phrases like aggressive value propositions scrawled in Sharpie like a deranged startup manifesto. The coffee machine begged for mercy. My microwave got demoted to a server stand. I took my original prototype and tore it apart like a mechanic rebuilding a busted V8. Everything that was clunky, I stripped. Everything Darren had misunderstood, I weaponized. The UI went from internal tool ugly to SAS polished. Buttons that used to say Start Job now glowed with Optimize Now. I layered in cloud hosting, a cleaner database structure, and a wizard-based onboarding flow that made setup idiot-proof, even Darren-proof. But the piece de resistance, a silent watermark, hidden in the API call headers. A unique identifier per client tied back to a private log table I alone could access. Not visible to users, undetectable unless you knew exactly where to look. Didn't affect functionality. It just watched. Every ping, every route pulled, every data refresh, it all left a fingerprint. Insurance, or maybe a loaded gun with a silencer. By week 3, I was working 18-hour days, surviving on toaster waffles and pettiness. My friends texted things like "you alive," and I replied with screenshots of JSON logs. I wasn't trying to be social, I was resurrecting myself in code. Each module I deployed felt like duct taping my self-worth back together. The analytics dashboard, that was my spine. The billing layer, my middle finger in UI form. The auto-scaling backend, proof I could build something better, not just in theory but in product. One morning, bleary-eyed, I pushed the final update and whispered, "It's ready." The system sat there in my browser like a coiled spring, quiet, clean, deadly. It didn't scream for attention. I didn't announce Generic Path Analytics with a trumpet blast or some sugar-high LinkedIn post about disrupting the industry. I slipped it into the world like a secret, a whisper, a ghost in the forums. I made a burner LinkedIn profile, name, Kate W. Bio, supply chain efficiency nerd/fractional ops consultant. My profile picture was a crop stock image of a smiling woman with a headset. No one would ask questions. Logistics people are too tired for drama. I joined a few niche groups. Logistics leaders, warehouse optimization geeks, the quiet death of route planning. I replied to questions about last-mile delays with vague confidence. We've been seeing success using a modular analytics layer, I'd say. If anyone wants to beta test, DM's open. Same thing on Reddit. A throwaway account named u/trucker&timer dropped comments in dry threads about inefficient dispatch software. No links. Just, we rolled something custom. Happy to share if folks are curious. And someone was. My first bite came from a family-run delivery outfit in southern Indiana. They handled floral deliveries and grocery drops in towns no one had heard of, where GPS coverage still hiccuped like a drunk uncle. The owner, a woman named Carla with a nicotine laugh, DM'd me on a Sunday night. "We lose too much time rerouting around train crossings. You said you had something?" I onboarded them manually, nervously hovering over the logs like a hawk in a server farm. The system held. Routes shortened. Carla emailed me 2 days later with a subject line that just said, "Holy shit." Then another company signed up. Then 2 more. Dashboard lit up like Christmas in a server rack. Usage logs, route pings, billing triggers. Real drivers using my system in real time, cutting miles off their days because of me. Not Darren, not the company. Me. I let myself smile, but only for a second. Because cautious hope is like petting a stray dog, move too fast and it bolts. Still, I celebrated in the most Karen way possible. I bought a new HDMI cable and vacuumed my kitchen. Progress. Then came the email. A plain contact form submission on my generic path site. No subject, no flourish. Just this. We're evaluating alternate routing optimization tools for Q3 integration. Do you offer enterprise pricing tiers? I scanned the email twice before noticing the domain. Ravenfreight.com. I blinked. That was Darren's old rival, a competitor who once offered my firm a buyout before Darren sabotaged the deal by leaking their system downtime stats. I remembered the all-hands panic, the emergency IT investigation, the slapdash apology email Darren sent that included the words, "Per my last panic." And now they were here, at my doorstep. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing one word into my logbook under a new heading titled, Inbound Fire. Phase 2. I almost missed the call when it came through. I was halfway through microwaving a soggy veggie burrito, mid-email to a user complaining about semicolon formatting in their exported CSV. The subject line just said Enterprise Inquiry, Raven Freight, and my burrito hit the floor. The procurement manager's name was Ellis. Polite, tactical. Said he'd seen a lot of flashy routing tools, but yours actually functions like it understands the road. I pitched cool and concise, but my heart jackhammered like I was demoing software for NASA. Raven Freight ran hundreds of vehicles across 3 states. If they signed on, it would be validation with a capital V. I talked them through my live dashboard, the way my system adjusted based on driver behavior, and flagged problem zones before dispatch even noticed. Ellis was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then, we'll be onboarding by next quarter and the enterprise agreement. I hung up and sat frozen for 30 whole seconds. No music, no notifications. Just my own breath, loud and ragged, like I'd been underwater too long. 3 weeks later, Generic Path was front and center at the Mid-Atlantic Logistics Expo. Not me, of course. I wasn't there in person. I had zero desire to shake hands with supply chain bros named Todd who thought pivot was a personality trait. Raven Freight featured my system in their keynote booth. Big touchscreen, real-time optimization demo, even ran a simulation that showed how my tool cut 13% off a daily mileage loop. The camera footage came to me from a friend still working conference AV. I watched the recording from my couch, hoodie up, glass of wine in hand, and there he was, Darren, wandering the expo like a dog that smelled steak. He passed Raven Freight's booth once, stopped, tilted his head, walked away, then circled back and watched the demo for 6 minutes straight. His arms folded, face unreadable except for the micro-expressions I knew too well. Curiosity, envy, hunger. He snapped a pic of the contact info. That night, my contact form lit up again. Interested in a limited vendor trial for a mid-sized delivery operation. Please advise onboarding steps. Signed, Wilson Procurement Services. I nearly laughed out loud. Email was scrubbed. No company name, no trace, but the IP location, same city as my old employer. The language, exactly the way Darren used to write his fake performance reviews. Mid-sized, limited trial, evaluate potential synergy. He always thought big words could bury small lies. I replied professionally, voice polished and neutral. Thank you for your interest. Trial link and credentials below. No smiley face, no signature flourish, just pure surgical customer service. I set up the sandbox environment with slightly throttled speed, just enough to keep them wanting more, and enabled watermark logging at maximum detail. A few days later, the system pinged. Someone logged in under the new trial. Username, Wilson82. And then again. And again. Daily. I didn't need a face cam to know it was him. He was using it. He just didn't know I was watching. I opened a new folder on my desktop titled For When the Mask Drops. Inside, I dragged the recorded Zoom demo, the emails, the access logs, and smiled. Quiet conquest. The first red flag came wrapped in a beautiful number. 38,912 API calls in a single week. That was nearly triple the trial tier cap. I sat back, fingers steepled, sipping from a chipped mug that said, "Coffee is my code review," in peeling vinyl letters. I clicked into the admin panel, filtered by user account, and there he was, Wilson 82, like clockwork. Logins at 8:12 a.m. every weekday. Usage spikes at lunch. Late night testing on Thursdays. I knew Darren's schedule better than I'd known it during employment. He was using it, not just dabbling, relying on it. A team account had popped up too, named Dispatch Ops. Same IP range, same telltale footprints. Route previews, export batches, weekly schedule generation. I scrolled through the activity log with the satisfaction of a chess player watching the king sweat 3 moves from checkmate. My system was now their spine. And I'd been very clear in the trial agreement. Overages trigger automatic tier upgrades. No email, no warning, no handholding. I opened the billing dashboard and clicked Adjust Plan. Set the tier to Enterprise Plus. Tripled the base rate. Enabled auto-renew. The invoice generated clean as a scalpel, sent to the masked billing contact at Wilson Procurement Services. I watched the clock tick. 2 days later, payment cleared. Not a peep from Darren. He either hadn't noticed yet or couldn't afford to flinch. I laughed, an ugly, joyful sound, and leaned back in my creaky chair. I hadn't made this system to punish him. Damn, if it wasn't the best side effect I'd ever coded. Every dollar his company sent me was a reverse promotion. They used to give me an underpaid salary and a sad desk with a drawer that stuck. Now they gave me $3,700 a month and not a single demand. I started watching their behavior like a zookeeper monitoring a caged animal. Whenever usage surged, I made quiet back-end tweaks, nothing visible, just enough to ensure they needed me for the next upgrade cycle. Darren logged in again. This time, I turned on session heat maps. He always hovered over the analytics tab longer than anything else. Watched the bar charts load, exported reports. He'd always had a thing for graphs. It made him feel strategic. I renamed the next graph module Performance Overview, Legacy Mode. It was my little joke. Every time he opened it, I got a ping. Every time he clicked, a breadcrumb logged. I didn't need revenge porn or public humiliation. This was clean. This was surgical. This was my ex-boss paying my rent, my internet, and my groceries one key press at a time. I closed the browser and whispered, "Keep clicking, you smug bastard." The subject line hit my inbox at 8:01 a.m. sharp. Urgent pricing discussion for Wilson Procurement. The name made me smirk. He still hadn't dropped the alias, like a kid wearing a fake mustache to dodge his mom in the grocery store. The email was polite at first, too polite. "We've appreciated the functionality of your platform during our pilot phase. However, in light of recent overage charges, we like to discuss pricing flexibility prior to renewal." Translation: we're addicted to this thing, but we just realized we've been billed like suckers. I crafted my reply as Nicole, Generic Path's fictional head of product. Thank you for your message. Pricing is based on documented usage and governed by the SLA signed on June 3rd. We're happy to review metrics on a call for full transparency. Within an hour, he bit. Let's set up time. Would prefer live review before we make decisions about switching providers. There it was, the bluff. Darren never could resist power posturing. But switching meant migrating thousands of route data entries, training his dispatch team, and praying another tool handled snowy mountain passes like mine did. He didn't have options. I scheduled the call for Friday morning, 10 o'clock sharp. I prepped like it was a courtroom deposition, pulled every invoice, usage report, and uptime stat. Built a slide deck with subtle passive aggression layered into the margins. Slide 2. Monthly API usage growth. Congratulations on scale. Slide 5. Overage tier activation. Auto-applied as per SLA Clause 4.2. Slide 7. Current usage relative to market benchmark. 127% of average, a sign of strong adoption. I even threw in a testimonial quote from Raven Freight. Generic Path's dynamic routing saved us from hiring 2 additional dispatchers. Just for fun, the night before the call, I added one final slide. Blank background, white letters. You pay us because we're better than what you replaced. The morning came. Zoom launched, and there he was, Darren live. Bald spot slightly bigger. Same smug squint behind his Warby Parkers. He didn't recognize me. My hair was darker, my voice lower, my video grainy on purpose. I wore clear frames and a plain white hoodie. I smiled the way frost smiles on a windshield. Thanks for joining. Let's walk through your account. He clicked his pen, already gearing up to haggle. I hit record. My tone was crisp, cordial. I explained the SLA, the overages, the metrics. Showed how his company had quadrupled usage in the last 3 months, how they were flagged as a high-value client based on traffic load alone. He tried to pivot. We may consider alternate vendors moving forward if we can't. I cut in smoothly. Absolutely, you're right. I've archived your usage history and can prepare a data export. Just note that vendor transition mid-cycle voids SLA protections, including route prediction continuity. He blinked, paused, jaw clicking behind the silence. Then, let me take this back to the team. I nodded. Of course. I'll leave this call with the invoice summary on screen for your review. Thank you for your continued partnership. I ended the meeting and laughed for the first time in weeks. But I wasn't done yet. I reopened the call, looked directly into the camera, and dropped the mask. Oh, and Darren? I said, pulling off the fake glasses, letting my real voice slip through. It's funny. This system was actually built by someone you laid off last year. He blinked. I smiled wider. Funny how value finds a way. His face didn't crack so much as fracture. A twitch in the left eyebrow. A half-formed frown. Long blink like his brain had to reboot. You could see it hit him, slow, thick, painful. I ended the call before he could speak. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my favorite chipped mug and poured the last of the good Colombian roast. The admin dashboard blinked with a new notification. Milestone reached. 50,000 monthly API calls. Invoice processed. $6,950. I stared at the screen. No parade. No press release. No LinkedIn applause. Just conquest and coffee. And tomorrow? Tomorrow I'd wake up as the CEO of a company that Darren couldn't live without, built from the code he'd thrown away, funded by the bills he couldn't afford not to pay. I raised my mug to the empty apartment. Thanks for the severance package, asshole. I didn't plan to show it. It was for me. A trophy with no frame.